first we have the consent agenda. We're gonna start with previous minutes. So if there's any discussion, have it. If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Okay, Sarah makes the motion, to approve the previous minutes. I'll take a roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Mort?
Aye.
Akua?
Present.
And Shaylee? And I am an I. I can't hear Shaylee. Unless you're muted.
She's muted.
I see that.
You had a quorum.
Yeah,
We had four.
so we're gonna move on to the policy first readings. First, we have the board member conflict of interest, which outlines what constitutes a conflict of interest, and selecting library materials. So if there are any, if there's any conversation, oh, she said I can barely hear you. Okay, Morgan, is that computer the audio or is your computer? That is the audio? Okay. Okay, so, where am I? Okay, first reading, board member conflict of interest or selecting library materials. If there's, any conversation around that or questions or comments, we can do that. If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I'll just say that the NMV board met to look at those policies and they recommended a couple of changes. One was a typo,
Okay,
and then the last was just a citation of where the at the end of the policy where those documents came from.
which the selecting library materials?
Yeah,
I thought it did.
only on one.
Only on one, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. If there are any other changes or questions, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Mort makes the motion to approve. I'll take a roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Mort?
Aye.
Akua?
Aye.
And Shaylee?
Aye.
And I am an I, and that brings us to the second reading of the policies. We have use of school facilities, recognition of visitors at board meetings, policy of non-discriminatory mascots and school branding, a policy on sections 504 and 88 grievance protocol for students and staff. And again, this is the second reading, so this means that after this approval, it would become policy. So, any questions or comments? Having none, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Make the motion.
Sarah has made the motion. I'll take a roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Mort?
Aye.
Akua?
Aye.
And Shaylee?
Aye.
All right, so moved. So that brings us to, and then there's a couple informational only policy, or procedures rather. And then now we're going to agenda preview and prioritization. Is there anything that needs to move?
I don't have anything to move.
Okay. Public comment, is there any public that would like to speak? Hearing none, we'll move on, and that brings us to the school spotlight, Richford Elementary School. Great, yeah.
So Melanie is our family engagement coordinator, and she is going to be presenting on really the work, kind of both her role and the work that she's been doing with our school this year.
Great.
So far.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I have a presentation. I think Morgan's going to bring that up for us to view as well. You can follow along. I believe it's in the notes as well. So my role as the family engagement coordinator and full-time this year at Richford Elementary School. One of the focuses of the work this year has been really reaching out to families and working on improving communication. And the way that we've started to do that is we've done a lot with newsletters. So we are creating a weekly newsletter and we're highlighting events in and around our school community.
People might need to stand next to that
You
computer.
want me to stand over there?
I just
It's
wonder if they can
that
hear.
mic there.
Want to move that?
I can see it.
Yeah, I'll move that.
Okay.
We don't do a lot of talking.
All right. I'll try to project. I do have that
Use
ability.
your big
I do
voice.
have that ability to project better. So one of the things we've done is after, because we're moving out of COVID, one of the great things is we're able to invite families back into the school setting. So that's been a really big priority of ours. As you can see in the first slide, this was at we did a harvest dinner. We had over 140 family members that came in and joined us in the evening. We prepared the food in the kitchen, staff supported that. It was really just wonderful to be able to welcome families back in. Our building is looking amazing. We've done a lot of work in the building. The lobby is beautiful. The staff does a great job of doing their boards and whatnot. So this is just one of the things that we've done. We built a calendar, actually we met today, and we're doing a monthly family engagement event. So we did an open house in September. We did the dinner in October. We welcomed families in again for a Thanksgiving meal that was during the school day. In December next week, we're able to host a winter concert again, which is something we haven't been able to do. And a lot of the work has been around just making sure families are notified of these happenings and invited to come in. So there is a weekly newsletter if you want to move to the next slide. And what we try to do is shift the focus around. So we're working on highlighting different classes and different things that are happening. In this past newsletter, this highlights one of our community collaborations, which is something that we've formed this year. We've developed a community bulletin board project. So classrooms sign up to display student work in different community locations. This particular trip was a preschool trip. We went to the Arvin A. Brown Public Library. The students rode on the bus. They did a story hour there, and the lovely collaboration, if you want to move on, was we did this in connection with Cold Hollow. So we have students at Cold Hollow that come to us on Fridays. So we were able to engage them in this opportunity. The Education and Human Services program put on a story hour at the public library. So those students went to the library, set up and facilitated a story hour, generated the work with the students, and then put up the display. So it's just kind of an example of one of the community events. This is our flyer from the Harvest Dinner that we hosted back in November. If you want to move on. So one of my roles has been to really update and maintain, the school website, and really we've got a really big presence right now in our social media pages. So we're really utilizing that as a tool, as a vehicle to get the word out, to communicate with families. People are responding really well to that. We do a lot of sharing of information about what's happening in the building. We're going to be doing a weekly highlight of a classroom. So I'll be signing up classrooms if they want to be the focus of our newsletter and kind of spotlighting each of the classrooms. If you can go to the next. So sharing upcoming events. This is our flyer for the winter concert, which is happening next week. That's been a fun thing to do, is to make sure that we're presenting it in a way that people are seeing. So we share that information on social media. It's emailed home to families, and our website is updated on a weekly basis. So all that information is available and people are able to access. We do print and mail copies to those folks who don't have internet access. So posting photos has been huge. Like, parents are so excited about seeing what's happening at our school. So a lot of my job is I get to be the paparazzi. I'm the RES paparazzi, so I get called into classrooms because we're doing this cool thing or we're going to do this presentation. And so I get to be a part of all the fun, which is great. So I get to go in and kind of highlight what the kids are doing.
connecting to the community, that's been a big one. This is a picture of our class visiting the RVA Brown Public Library. So currently we have relationships built with the public library, with Notch, with Our Lady of the Meadow, and with the town hall. So each of those locations, we have student work that changes monthly. We also have a staff member who is working on our farm to school project, and he is displaying work at the market as well. And it's just a great way of kind of highlighting additionally to the community the work that's going on at the school level. And that's been really, really super successful. The kids are super excited about getting out into the community. They're learning a lot about the resources that are right here. So it's bridging that gap between home and school, and it provides them an opportunity to see some of the places that they can then visit with their families as well. And we've planned some events. This was a school-wide fire safety. The fire department brought 5 or 6 vehicles down, parked along. During October was Fire Safety Month. So we had a morning that was dedicated to that. They came down, they showed the kids the gear, we went out as classrooms, the kids were able to learn about what they do, the important role that they play, and then take home some safety information for families. I kind of jumped around, back to community bulletin boards. This is a picture of our class, our second, who was that? First grade? Kindergarten? Kindergarten visiting the town hall, which is another connection we want to make even stronger. There's such a beautiful space that is underutilized. So we'd like to, as a school community, think about planning some events that are not just in the school building. We've done some work at the, they have a beautiful stage, so we can also maybe think about doing a play or a performance that happens there for the school. This is an example of our bulletin boards. So our preschoolers, the first batch of Smart Cookies, is currently up at Notch. And then these are our kindergarten students this fall doing putting up their display work at the RVA Brown Public Library. Our Lady of the Meadows has been a huge success. So we partnered with Our Lady of the Meadows. We have one class in particular, a 4th and 5th grade class, who's developing a relationship with residents there. We've been there 3 times now. We're headed back next week. It is just wonderful to see the students and the residents. It's amazing. It's powerful to even see it in pictures, but it's amazing to see it in person. The kids are excited to go back. It's showing us a whole different side of our students that we sometimes don't see in the school setting. And they get in a setting like this, and they read to the residents, they play games with the residents. We're gonna be decorating cookies next week. It's just an amazing relationship. And then we leave our work up. The kids have made cards for them. We have a 3rd grade group who hasn't visited yet, who wants to jump on board, and they've made, cards for the residents and written letters. So they're super excited about that partnership. I know I already talked about the collaboration with Cold Hollow Education and Human Services. That is an amazing program. We're loving having the students in the classroom. I have 2 students that shadow with me, so they travel with me in the school and in the community, which is nice. So we're talking about some of my role and the community, some of the opportunities for them. I'm seeing the students in the classroom engaging with the teachers and we have some really good future teachers coming. So that has been an amazing collaboration too, and I'm happy to be a part of that. I have some pictures of the students and their partners, if Morgan can. So these are some of the partners. Classroom, we have a student with a speech language pathologist, we have a student in the RISE, and we have other students in some of our elementary classrooms that are shadowing. And so springing off that, Emily Kimball has said, you know what, we want to do something for your community. So we've signed up families. They're making gingerbread kits for 60 students in our community, which we'll be distributing on Friday at 53 Main when Operation Happiness goes out. So it's just going to grow. We're forming these partnerships, and I look at the community. It's not just Richford; it's the bigger community. We can really build this and become so much stronger. It's powerful when we all work together, for sure. So another role that I have is making sure that families feel supported and welcomed into Kelly has initiated a project where everybody comes in for morning meeting. We have had so many families coming in and participating at morning meetings. It's been wonderful. And then they're asking what more. We want more. We want to come more. We want to do more. So that's been a really nice opportunity for us as well. Helping students, supporting students and families with attendance. So some of our families have some struggles with coming to school and kind of identifying what the barriers are and helping support the family through that. My role, I attend meetings, I help support. The nice part about this role is I can go into the homes, I can work with families, connecting them to resources. So just being in the school and building that relationship and then kind of taking it out into the community and connecting family to those resources. I've done a slide for each kind of I'm not controlling the slides. Yeah. So assisting families in accessing resources. One of the things that I do at school is we're part of the backpack program. So every Friday, the food goes home for families that have signed up. I think Enosburg as well is a part of that program. But connecting families to food resources. So if there's food insecurity, we want to know. And I also run the food shelf, so it's kind of a natural progression. And we're able to support families in that way as well. Connecting families that are struggling with housing. Helping them fill out applications for housing, Section 8. Those are things that we're able to support through this project. Food resources, which we already talked about, making sure we can identify if there's needs with clothing. We're connected really closely. I also continue to work for Notch, so we have access to the thrift store. I know that Enosburg has built a wonderful program that I just learned about. So they're doing like I don't know what she's calling it. What's Janessa calling it? So she has the care closet. So where there are things that students can come in and access. So they're easily available. We do have a personal pantry at Richford, and we're going to work on like figuring out how to meet those needs in a more immediate way by doing something like a care closet. I loved that idea when Janessa shared that with me. Enosburg FEC. Mental behavioral health, medical, dental. I'm able to help families that are struggling with access be able to connect to those resources as well, because we want to build strong families and make sure that the families are feeling supported. Helping with employment. So we are working with hireability for some of our families, connecting them to that resource. It's a resource that is here in town a couple of days a week. So I'm able to help families connect if they need help with work searches, working with the Department of Labor as well. So. And substance and recovery support. We have Turning Point, which is here in town on Wednesdays. And so we are able to help people that are needing some supports in that way navigate that system as well. And the best part of my job is getting to work with these amazing students and staff and most of all, the families. So I'm super enjoying my role. That's just a piece of what's going on. There are so many amazing things happening at Richford Elementary right now. This is just touching on a few of them. So I'm excited to be in this role. I'm excited to be a part of this community. I'll take any questions if anybody has
Thank
any.
you.
That's great.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
This was one of the roles that we added during the pandemic because we saw so much of the disconnect that came as a result of the pandemic. So to be able to see what this looks like now, now that the gates have opened a little bit for us, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you for all that you're doing.
I'm excited to be a part of it. I'm happy to be here.
Nice, good.
I think it's been like a combination, again, like this year, everybody just sort of figuring out each other's roles, and then how Melanie's role has shifted over the last year and a half. And, yeah, sort of just looped into, so it's really like a catch-all. Her
Yeah,
job's kind of
right.
a catch-all.
I like it though. It's really good to be, I feel like I can touch a lot of,
It's up your alley.
it is right up
You're
my alley.
right in
I
your
love,
wheelhouse, your
I
strength,
love
yeah.
connecting. And it's nice. Not that I enjoyed my time at the high school. I did. I just feel like being in one building has really, it's a full-time role in one building. It's hard. It was more difficult to try to split myself between the two. So,
Are you finding that attendance issues are taking away from like all the community partners? Because
So-
you've done a lot, I was just thinking that, and dealing with attendance.
yeah, interestingly enough, so if I look at the data, which I don't have the actual data with me, but I can generate that. So comparing last year to this year, elementary school only, because those are the apples and apples,
Right.
we're in a way better place as far as attendance. And I think some of that is families are feeling better,
Yeah.
just in general. I mean, and we're working on building on that feeling. So I think because they're feeling they're in a much better place, we want to take this opportunity to really, let's build the positives. So when we do have to make that call about, attendance or whatever, it's kind of, oh wow, but look at all the great things that are happening. I think it's right for that. I think we're in a position where families are wanting their kids in school, and they're seeing that there's lots of great things happening in Richford Elementary and all of our schools, and are wanting to be a part of that. And that's shifting the attendance piece. I feel like some of my work, yes, is attendance-based. I still have to, generate those letters and talk to folks about, coming to school more consistently.
Right.
But we've had a lot less need for that this year.
Yeah, and I think that when you're, the families that we are dealing with attendance have lots of those other things going on.
Yeah.
Right.
So it does provide an in to talk about the food insecurity, the clothing,
Absolutely.
the housing, the mental health, the
Right.
medical, all of those things.
Right.
So in some ways, it's almost the end
Right.
to dealing
Yeah.
with some of the other stuff.
Identifying the
Okay,
barriers, and then,
Yeah.
and it's not just, the barriers are the families struggle sometimes too.
Right.
So if we can address their needs, they can better support their students in every way, in coming to school and in being successful.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for sharing
Yeah.
that. I think that was
Definitely.
really great to hear.
Check out our website and
Yeah.
because more good stuff to come.
Nice.
So, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Depart and go watch the basketball.
So now that brings us to Morgan and the financial updates.
So in your email, you got the monthly financial report. My plan is really to focus on next year's budget, but if anybody has any questions on that, I can, on the current year report, I can try to answer those. Otherwise, I'll pull up this presentation. So we've gone a little of the way through this each of the last couple of months. We are at your sort of second board meeting for discussing the budget. We have the yield proposal from the tax commissioner, which is the first of the four numbers that sets the residential tax rate, and one of the three that you don't control. So in theory, we will have a pretty final number of equalized pupils by Thursday. I actually did see an advance number, which I'll share with you in a moment. Came in over the weekend. In years past, we have not had this number finalized even by the time we need to warn our budget. What I'm told is that the data coming into the state is coming in a lot faster and cleaner from the field. So I think by the time we warn a budget, we will be pretty confident in that number. And then the CLA will come in sometime around Christmas, but it should definitely be in by the end of the year. So when we meet again in January, that number will be final as well. No change to the general budget objectives, it's just the 3 board goals, and then looking at the differences between the 2 high schools. We covered many of these considerations in the previous meetings. Transportation contract bids will be submitted by, I think it's December 21st, so we should have a solid number for the SU meeting, and hopefully we'll warn a budget at the end of this month for the SU. As I put in your board packet, the yield rate that they announced of 15,479 is a pretty dramatic increase over last year, and so basically what that means is for every dollar on your tax rate, districts are raising more money, or the yield going up with everything else being the same pushes the tax rate down. So that is initial good news. That number assumes that the surplus in the ed fund is all gonna go towards buying down property tax. So the caveat is that the legislature can do whatever they want. Last year, they took a big chunk of money out of that reserve fund, and that's how they funded universal meals for that first year. We don't know how they're gonna fund universal meals for next year, so there is a temptation that they could pull that out and drive that yield down. Because it is a very green legislature this year, there's a lot of turnover. No one that I've talked to is expecting anything to come out of the legislature quickly. And so I'm pretty confident that we're gonna be using this $15,000 figure for your budget, because nobody will be floating another more real number before mid-January. I'd mentioned that we got a preliminary equalized pupil number. Enosburg-Richford was down 14 equalized pupils. As pupils go down, tax rate goes up, given everything else being equal. That decline is pretty small in the grand scheme of things, and is certainly gonna be made up for by the increase in the yield. So I'm not worried yet. They're cleaning up the data. There's some numbers that they have in there, so that number could drift up or drift down, but I doubt it'll move too dramatically. And we'll get into the details of that next month when we're talking about revenue and tax rates. This chart is the enrollment projections. We've not made any changes since we talked about it last month. In terms of expense considerations, we know your non-medical insurance is now gonna come in at about 7% up. So that's a pretty hefty increase. That's your liability and your property insurance. So this budget has incorporated that. We also will be talking a little bit about the facilities plan. And so now that we have Vern going around to the schools and talking with principals, we're in a better place for long-term planning. We know at Enosburg Elementary that the paving of the parking lot would be the big project if we pull that off for next year. There's a source of funding to help with that, and so we don't have any money in this budget because we think we can get it pretty much fully funded out of that. We know that at Richford Elementary, we have asbestos that we still need to abate, but we are also still waiting for the PCB results. So I've not put anything in there for Richford Elementary. And then the other big project on the horizon is at Cold Hollow, which we will discuss later on in the meeting. We had floated a couple of different ideas for funding the Sugar House project. In the budget that I shared with you yesterday, it is assuming that we are putting $400,000 into the general fund budget, which is money that we would be able to spend in the next school year on that project. And the reason for that number is that we're getting rid of about $420,000 of bond payment. We're paying that off, I think, in the next month or two, so it will not be in your next year budget. Staffing changes, the only change in terms of proposed staffing from what we discussed last month was the addition of a full-time theater teacher that would be shared by the two high schools. Other than that, nothing has changed since the first draft. A couple of pie charts which we'll use in the various avenues that we put information out to your public. For folks who are new, I know that Akua and Shaley probably haven't seen this before. That big blue section is what we spend on our own people. So the one half of that pie is on salaries, and then roughly a fifth is on health insurance and other benefits. That quarter that is the red chunk are services. That is primarily costs coming from the supervisory union. So that would be your transportation of students, that would be your food service, and that would be your special educators are all coming in on that big slice. And that little yellow slice up there is kind of what you spend on stuff. So that's supplies, eaten up largely by utilities, so your oil and sewer, water, what have you, electricity. So this is something that we put out a few years ago. There's a perception in the community that most of our budget, or a big piece of our budget, is spent on buying things, and if we only used fewer crayons in our schools, we'd be able to cut the tax rate.
Right.
And so this is really there to point out that what we do spend money on is our people. This is the same information. The NMV side wanted to see it a different way as well, so I decided I would do it for ERU. When we get into late January, when we're working on the presentation that we want for the public, we can decide if you want both of these or one of these or none of these.
Okay.
This is different in that it's going to show those trend lines, and you can see that ratio has really not been changing over the year, even though the individual categories are
Oh, right.
creeping up
That's
from
nice.
year to year. Similar chart, but rather than what we buy, this is what we do. So that green half is instruction, with the biggest chunk of that being direct classroom instruction. Special ed, the local special ed portion gets a little small slice of that. The blue section is what the state refers to as support services. So starting at about 7 o'clock, I'm going around. That purple section is primarily your guidance. The next section, instructional support, is professional development, technology, and library. That little red sliver is school board, so it's you all, and then your legal budget and your insurances. School administration is your principal's office. Central services starting at 9 o'clock is again the services provided by the supervisory union, so primarily transportation, food service, special ed teachers. And then as you get up towards the top, buildings and grounds is the dark, ugly blue section. You've got some local transportation costs in there. And then that orange slice represents that $400,000 if we decide to go with a construction project in the general fund budget.
Okay.
And then when we work through the projected tax rates, really what we're talking about tonight is the budgeted expenses. So that's the first part of that equation. And we can get into the details next of what you want to spend your money on. But before I leave this slide deck, I'll ask if there are any questions on what you saw there in terms of the 10,000 foot view. I can certainly come back to it.
Yeah.
So in your packets, I sent you 3 separate files.
Yeah.
One was a list of all the proposed staff,
Right.
and that includes your folks as well as contracted services that I can identify, so your SROs, staff that we contract through NCSS. The second file was the budget in 30 pages of grueling detail, detailing every single line. And then finally was the recap page, which we tend to make all this information available, but we sort of push the recap page because I think it's more digestible for folks. And I'll pull that up online as well. So slightly different format from last year, but still trying to break it down into those big picture categories. So tied to that pie chart you saw, the first section is your instruction, second section is kind of the support services, and then that last line is the piece for the construction project. And then debt service, you'll see that big drop. It's actually almost $450,000 drop. And that wasn't big enough to warrant the line on the pie chart.
Gotcha. And so what's the discrepancy in the direct instruction line?
So when we were building your budget last year, we were trying to get ahead of Act 173 and the change to special ed funding. And when we warned the budget, our best guess was that special ed costs were not going to be recognized at the district level anymore. And so we had built all of your paras and we budgeted them all as direct and said, okay, we're not going to get reimbursement on them. We're not going to be able to count them.
Right.
And so we're going to call them all direct instruction. That seems to be changing. And
Okay.
so we are pulling some out that are going to be tied to special ed. We're not going to get reimbursed directly on them, so in a way, the distinction doesn't matter as much as it had in the past. 2 years ago, we tried to really get that as correct as possible because you were getting money based on who we were able to call special ed versus regular ed.
Right.
Now it's really just a programmatic distinction, so I will probably go through and take another look at folks and say, oh, that person's really special ed or that person's really regular ed. But in terms of the revenue and so in terms of the tax rates, it doesn't really matter.
So just to be clear, we're not necessarily moving those people into the SU budget, or are we?
These are all people in the local budget.
Right.
So the folks that we have moved into the SU budget are the paraeducators who are in those alternative programs. And then paraeducators who have DT level of training, which is behavior technician. So they've gone through and gotten a higher level of training and they tend to follow individual students around.
So let me just clarify.
Mhm.
So that was increased more last year because we thought we were gonna get revenue from some of that direct instruction? No. Wait.
What was increased last year?
Well, so you were saying like last year, not knowing, we left them in there.
Right. So you still have a bank of paraeducators who are in your schools and are paid locally. We just had moved them all to direct instruction and now we're pulling some of them out
And putting them
in local special ed.
in local special ed. Okay, got you, down there. Okay. I got you. Okay. And what else? I think that was my only question. Oh, yeah, Akua, do you have a question?
I do, yes.
Yeah.
Can you speak to the increase in support services, what that represents?
I believe we have an additional counselor at Richford Elementary, which is a chunk of that. The rest of it really may be related primarily to salaries. I don't think we've made any programmatic changes other than at Richford Elementary.
You mean which, so when you see that it's increased by
$500,000.
$500,000?
500,000.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
So you've got a fairly stable and senior nursing staff at all your schools. We haven't seen a lot of turnover there. I feel like we're not projecting a lot of turnover in guidance. I know there was a bunch 2 years ago. And those are the two categories under student support for guidance and health. And I should say that the central services and the SU assessment is a complete wild guess at this point. We've looked at staffing with the SU board. Next week, we will be bringing a complete budget to them. So staffing expenses, which similar to your pie chart, most of our cost is in people.
Right,
And then we'll hopefully have a more solid picture of revenue,
okay.
just primarily in the special ed world. And so that number could drift up if transportation comes in a lot higher than I am hoping it does, or it could drift down if special ed revenue comes in better than we're expecting.
So it's fair to say that it is the increase in the general fund expenses as a result of the support services that we have put into place?
I think that is true. I mean, we have done some staffing changes throughout, and
Right.
so you'd really need to tease that out. When you're looking at all 5 schools combined,
Right.
you don't necessarily see that in this big picture.
You're talking about overall increase.
Yeah,
The other thing is this is the first time you're paying for the negotiated agreement piece as well. And you're spreading that across along with all of the increases in all of the associated healthcare
so,
costs.
okay, but so am I looking at this correctly? So like the total instruction increase is 64,000, but the total support services is 1.3,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And so that's where that's your increase, is the combination of those two. So it looks like the majority of the increase to that line is from the support services.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
Now I get what you were asking.
you see. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, are our interventionists and what have you in support services, or are they in direct instruction?
They're indirect.
They're indirect, okay.
So really in support services, your first line is guidance and health. Your second line is professional development, which is pretty tiny.
Oh, yeah, you said that.
Library and technology.
Right,
General administration is school board. School administration is principal's office.
okay.
Did you mention something, I don't know if it was this budget, but about putting certain positions in the right place? Is that this budget? I wonder if that's some of what they're seeing.
We did some movement of folks from the SU to local budgets because we were brokering these split contracts in the SU, but you shouldn't necessarily see that here because we either budgeted that you were going to pay the SU for them, or we budgeted that we were going to pay them directly out of your payroll. So you would see that on the first pie chart of increase of salaries and a decrease of,
So that's another good question is, are those positions that we were talking about, were grant funded and then moving into local? There were, I think, 8 of them. Or is that at the SU?
FDSU.
I get my meetings mixed up, okay. Okay. I just wanna make sure, you know, for instance, like our board goals are around SEL and literacy, and I just wanna make sure that it aligns. And so if one of our goals is SEL, increase in support services would make sense, for sure. Okay. All right, I'm thinking
So Jamie is actually right now going through the staffing list and making sure that I have an appropriate dollar amount for each person.
okay.
We covered early on some of the assumptions I was making in terms of staffing because we're negotiating with our support staff. If folks want to hear that again, it's something we should do in closed session because we are negotiating with them. But I'm happy to do that, or I'm happy to talk individually with board members offline if that's easier. So we'll be doing some cleaning up of that. The only other major changes, unless there's a programmatic shift that the board wants to see, will be the principals have had a few days to sit with this level of detail. And I'm never surprised if they come back and they say, hey, you forgot this employee who's actually here in the building and we're not.
Gotcha.
Or we've had a kiddo move out of town and we're not gonna need as many paraeducators next year, or something like that. So there'll be a little bit of movement there, but in terms of health insurance increase should be set. Dental, multi-line insurance all set. You don't tend to pay out a lot of money in tuition, so I don't think there are gonna be many changes there.
Okay.
The big picture for you will be when we meet next month and go over revenue and we put a number to how many high school kids
That's what I'm
Beth and
curious
Matt are
about.
gonna have. And my initial look at your graduating seniors and your incoming 8th graders
Yeah.
is that you're in good shape. I think we're gonna have about the same number of kids
Okay.
budgeted for, so that's a comfortable place to be going into January.
Nice. Anything else? Any questions? I mean, at this point, I feel like it's all information until we see the revenue and the rest of it playing out in our per pupil. Or not per pupil, what am I thinking? Number
Yeah.
of kids.
Yep, nice pupils.
Equalized, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, so we will have that for your next meeting.
okay.
If folks are wading through this big packet and come up with specific questions, feel free to email me, just don't do it
As a
to the
group.
board.
Don't do it as a group.
Yep.
Okay,
Just do it to me individually.
okay. Any questions from Akua or Shaylee?
Not at the moment, no,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
None for me.
Again, we'll come back to this again. Anything else?
I think so.
Okay. So that brings us to Lynn.
Are you going to share mine or are you gonna give me share? permission?
I can share yours.
I have a pretty, I thought you would be doing a lot of work on budget today, so kept mine pretty short.
Thank you.
So first up is personnel. So you have a few action items there. We'll start with hiring. So EES, is this for 22? She's already in that role. Remind me why this is bolded for Leslie?
Because she was a
Long-term,
long-term sub
gotcha.
and now
Okay.
she's.
Thank you. So you have two that are actionable there, in at Enosburg Elementary, Leslie Underwood, grade 4 teacher, and at Richford Elementary, Joseph
Frisione.
Frisione is a school counselor. So I'd be looking for the board to make a motion to approve hiring for both of those positions.
I'll make a motion. Perfect. We have a motion to approve those positions. I'll take a roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Mort?
Aye.
Akua?
Aye.
Shaylee? Aye. And I am an aye.
I prefer to just skip this next section, but I won't.
This, I
don't
like reading that.
There was a letter attached in your board notes from Rachel. And I don't know, do you want to say anything? Do you want me to say something? What are you feeling?
Please don't ask me to read it. I am not going to be returning after this school year, so I am due for contract negotiations this year and will not need to negotiate with me. I have an opportunity to work in education through a kind of different lens, one that would have me working, taking on and eventually over a consulting business for teacher and administrator development that my dad started several years ago, that it's now a chance for me to see if that is the right path for me going forward, and I feel like the time is right to try it. So I've loved working with this school and community, and I said it in my letter, but I'm not applying to work to other places. I'm going to work directly with my own family, and that is the only thing that would take me away from this community.
You're going to be very sad to see you go. Rachel has spent many years working in middle school
Yeah.
and has really done an outstanding job. I am happy for Rachel because I know it means something different for raising a young family too, and I think that that's going to be a big change. They're going to be big holes for us in terms of where we're going from here. And she does know that she has an open invitation, so that if she decides that's not the path that she wants in the future, she's going to come talk to me.
Thank you very much for
Yes,
everything.
thank you, Rachel. So the second resignation is Mary LaRose, who was a grade 4-5 teacher at Richford Elementary School, and that resignation will be effective at the end of this month. So ask the board to move on both of those.
Do we have a long-term sub for
We have done some reconfiguring, and so now all of the 4th and 5th graders are in 2 classrooms.
Okay.
And that has been the case since earlier this
That's
year.
what I was thinking. Okay. So I would entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
Okay. We have a motion. I'll take a roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Mort?
Aye.
Akua? And Shaylee? Aye. Yes, very sad aye.
So you have two retirements. You have Margaret Doe, who's been a long time educator at Enosburg Elementary School, most recently as a literacy interventionist. Annette Goyne, the librarian, this is her space here, librarian for Richford Junior Senior High School, and Charles Hess, the driver's ed teacher for Richford Junior Senior High School. So we'd ask the board to make a motion regarding the retirements of those 3 individuals.
I'll make the motion.
Mort has made a motion. All in favor? Sarah?
Aye.
Mort?
Aye.
Akua?
Aye.
And Shaylee? Aye. And so moved, and I have an aye.
Okay. So I do know one of the things I didn't mention is that I think Annette is considering staying on a portion of time next year. I think in the transition planning for the new library position, so we'll be able to keep her a little bit of time during her retirement. And that's actually, that option has worked out pretty well for us in other situations. They have the ability to continue to work some while they're drawing down retirement, so that's been helpful. So there's a list up there of open positions. Many of those are positions for this year, but I've made a decision for hiring, typically I tell administrators we're gonna hold on advertising for positions that we know of for 23, 24. But I'm not gonna wait this year because we have had such a difficult time with hiring. So as we know, like we already know, we have certain positions in certain buildings that were never filled from last year. Those positions are gonna get advertised, posted right away. Some are already up there for the following school year, so we're trying to get ahead of the hiring season. So you may start to see next year postings as well.
So, that being said though, with Rachel's position, considering how hard staffing has been and thinking about the budget, because that might be a pretty significant position, that maybe thinking about different options that you could bring to us around that, maybe.
Okay.
It being a smaller school, and
So
what our
different
options might be.
configurations for leadership.
Potentially, just thinking about, I mean, we've been through many principal searches and just knowing sometimes how difficult that can be, and it is a smaller school. We just saw a pretty significant increase in our expenses. I haven't seen the revenue. So I'm just wondering if just options. I'm not saying, I'm just thinking like as far as what the big picture might be.
Okay,
If you don't mind doing that.
you can do that.
Okay. Who knows? I could be totally wrong.
So the last piece under personnel is there for you to see, and for Morgan to use in budgeting purposes, any advancements. So that's all of your teachers who are moving a column because of educational credits that they have earned. That is all I have under personnel, and the only thing I have under students is the fabulous pictures that Courtney put up there for all of you to see in the report, and she always says that she appreciates the opportunity to go stalk all of the schools' Facebook pages to try to grab pictures from each of the buildings for each of these meetings. So that's all I have for you tonight.
Wow. Okay. So that brings us to the board reports, and so we will start with Kelly.
All information.
All informational. Do you want to hit on some of the spotlights? I mean, you
Well,
just did a
certainly
spotlight.
Melanie,
Yeah.
yes, I know, Melanie did like that really is a big part of
Yeah,
it. I would say academically, one of
Yeah.
the things that we spent all fall working on was student conferencing. So we had a number of teachers. We were very fortunate to have a large number of our early K-2 group of teachers who attended the Reading Workshop Institute this summer for a week. And so they were able to bring that information back, and they actually presented to all of the staff. And so even though 3 through 5 is working on their learning stream this year is on math, we're really working school-wide on Readers and Writers Workshop. And so we did all fall, we did a pretty deep dive into conferencing
Okay.
with kids and sort of redoing our workshop. And yeah, it was really nice to focus all fall on one topic and to do a pretty deep dive every single month into conferencing. So the teachers did a book study and have really drilled into how to use data effectively with student conferencing. So I would say that's our biggie. And then after the holidays, we're gonna shift into read alouds. And that was another real high leverage point.
Nice.
In reading,
Good.
so, yeah.
Beth.
It was all informational. We have had a lot of students participating in the community. We've had students at craft fairs for the last couple of weekends selling their wares from the Industrial Arts Program. And we had Melody Tracy was at Montgomery from Nate's program, the Human Services and Education. And it's nice to see them out in the community being entrepreneurs. We've had our high school students teaching in the middle school quite a bit. They taught health lessons yesterday. And Jim Hubbard brought Richard Farnham 2 weeks ago to all our winter athletes and their parents, was extremely well received, to talk about like the real meaning of being a student athlete. I heard it was a great presentation.
Nice. Okay. What?
Request for folks to speak up.
Oh, speak up. Okay, here we go. Jen, that brings us to you.
It's all informational. We just wanted to go back to parent conferences. After conferences, I met with the teachers, and we figured out it was 87% of our parents attended conferences, and then we put a plan together to reach out to the parents that couldn't. It is kind of flu season, so there were several that were sick, and so those have been made up. So we're getting right there. We just have a few more. And we have started the window for 360 math and literacy. STAR has opened up, and so teachers are already starting to do that, and we've had 2 classes so far have 100% growth. So that's kind of exciting because we're really looking at that growth. And then we did get feedback from parents. We asked what they thought of the trimesters, and teachers and parents are really enjoying the trimesters. We got a lot of positive feedback about not having a report card focused during that first conference, so it was really more goal setting, and people seem to really like that. And for teachers, they really like having the longer time to try interventions and to help kids show that growth. So the trimesters have been a positive thing.
Oh, good. Good. Okay, and that brings us to Rachel.
Shared my letter.
Send your letter.
I guess a big highlight from last month is we had Amy Brewer from Franklin Grand Isle Tobacco Prevention Coalition come do a presentation to the middle schoolers. We've seen an uptick in the past few years of students using vapes in school, and actually Amy shared some data with the students, and the YRBS data shows that's about 26% in that age group, which is really scary, and it's mostly because they are literally directly marketed as though they are candy to children. So anything people can do to combat that messaging around and with kids is really beneficial. But she did a presentation on just like the risks associated with that, how it impacts your brain, how it impacts like your focus and your learning, what happens when you are addicted, and what can happen like in the long term. And one of the hopefully the kids took away this too. One of the scariest things about the vapes that she shared is they're so new that we don't actually know what all the long-term effects are going to be. So kids who have started using them at such a young age, we know about popcorn lung and scarring, but we don't know in 20 years the impact on their lungs. And so really trying to figure out how to communicate that to them as much as possible, that like just because it doesn't look like a cigarette doesn't mean it's not causing you some irrevocable damage. So so it was really great to have her come in and give that presentation. She did a week or a month of coming in once a week and doing like some educational activities during student lunches leading up to the presentation, where they could win prizes and spin a wheel, and so that was also really popular and well received. And then was that just last week, the concert?
Yes.
The band and chorus
Thursday.
concert. A lot of stuff happens, so I lose track. Was really beautiful. It was really nice. The first concert in 3 years. And the students were just phenomenal. The amount of growth you could see over time with music and all the performances, and several combined high school and middle school pieces that were really, really cool. So I sat with Holly. We were like,
We were fans.
we were so proud. It was good. So just a really, really special celebration of student learning. Shout out to AJ and Camille for all the work.
Yeah, that was great. I also liked how there were members of the community in the band, like filling in holes. So that was neat.
Yeah, the flu, RSV, COVID wave hit Enosburg right at the week of the concert, so they were popping some community members in to fill in some parts that they had lost. But it's really nice to have a community that comes in and steps in to do that when kids are out sick.
I appreciated that last year during Enosburg's graduation too.
Yeah.
It was powerful to look down and see that, the pomp and circumstance was being performed by that combined community/school band.
I liked it. That brings us to Matt.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Can you hear us okay?
I absolutely can.
Okay.
So first of all, I want to say I'm gonna miss Rachel, her for moving on and taking care of her family and her new opportunity. She's been a real resource this year, tremendous resource. There's a couple of things I want to hit on. One is back in October, we had the Molly Swainbank breast cancer fundraiser, Pink Out, and I never mentioned that at the previous board meeting. I want to mention it not only because it was a beautiful effort among our students, but it was also a terrific collaboration with two other schools. One, our brother or sister school right here, Richford, who agreed to move their boys' game to St. Albans for us, so that we could play and do the fundraiser. And then we kind of needed to move heaven and earth to find, originally we only had a boys team lined up, and every bone of justice in Heather Hawkins and my body said, well, we can't just do this big event. But we had to find a team, and so you guys may have heard of When You Ski, not only because I used to work there, but it was also in the news last year. And what was really beautiful is the way that they wanted to be part of that fundraiser. The girls' teams got really into the, they all wore pink socks, maybe. So just as Richford donned the pink and Enosburg donned the pink, we also had a nice moment, being able to collaborate with When You Ski, have them feel comfortable coming and joining them at fundraising. So being out there in the cold through two extra overtimes there, it was a really beautiful experience. I want to point out that we had 12 students audition for district music, and all 12 were accepted, which was pretty phenomenal. And then the last thing that I want to mention is data use. So one of the cool things about being brand new is I can be a little bit of an anthropologist and ask questions and try and figure out where things stand. And so the big thing that stood out in terms of data use at Eastern Falls High School was people didn't see the connection, really direct, immediate connection between why we do STAR data, why we do literacy and math assessment. Yes, we do it to put things on record, but where does it really, my cat's coming for a visit. Where does it really hit the ground in terms of why it should matter for kids and why it should matter for teachers? We know it matters. We know literacy and math matter, and we know that knowing how we're doing matters, but people needed to see a more practical application. So I put in the notes that one of the things we're doing right now is starting semester 2, we are going to be restructuring how we do our 9th grade interventions. Polly, do you have a 9th grader? You do, right?
I do, yes.
Yeah, I don't know if she's in one of the classes that'll get restructured, but
What?
But
Fine.
I know, there will be communication, I swear on the Bible, okay. But we wanna try and target our interventions better, because right now there's there was a blanket solution given a number of changes coming into this year, but we wanna be able to use STAR data to specifically target the skills students need. It'll provide time for pre-teaching and reteaching, and just able to be a lot more focused with what we're doing with those numbers. So that's what we're gonna start in January, and then in April, so in January, we're being really, or I'm sorry, we have the testing coming up next week. We're being really clear with the freshmen that it will have an impact on what sorts of interventions they're getting. And if they don't take it seriously, they can always retake it, so that they're getting the right interventions, and hopefully we'll see that direct connection for them. And then with our current 10th, 11th graders, in April, their assessments will also be really important because P.E.G were pretty good at copycatting some of Beth's methods, but we really want to get good at using our AT, they call it IT in Richford. We want to get good at using our AT time, so that instead of students sort of milling about, it's fine when they have, there are clubs that are valuable, there are different community service things kids are doing, but there are times where kids are a little bit undirected, and we can absolutely use that time much more academically in a much more focused way. So in April, we'll have the third round of STAR testing, and that will have an impact on kids' schedules for next year. So my little wrap up would be shout out to Beth and shout out to Rachel and also to Gab for their support on these various pieces of data and the rest of things.
Nice. And that brings us to me.
Okay, the informational stuff that I just want to highlight are the fact that we have right now 10 students that will be traveling to Milton for CDL training. I want to give a shout out to Levi. She's doing a good job finding funding for that and making sure those kids are getting what they need and support in that program. And then the other thing on that list is the kids that are in paid co-ops are listed there. We still have a bunch of internships and shadows, and we'll eventually have the medical career students out once they get their LNA. We'll knock on the door looking for them. And then the action items, I wanted to put on paper instead of just PowerPoints and whatnot, all the stuff we've done to keep everybody up to date and in the loop of all the different phases we've done with this building project.
Nate, can I just pause for a second?
You can.
I just put the link in the chat for those of you who are joining online.
And I think it's also on the agenda too, so either way you can get to it. And so this is something you can just kind of have to kind of see what we've done and where we are. Obviously, we're in progress in the sugar house project. At this point, stage 1 of phase 2, if you will, is that we've committed $200,000 a loan from the capital reserve fund. And the second stage of phase 2 is putting $400,000 into the local budget to complete. Now, we were hoping to have this done by next year around this time, and obviously that's probably not going to happen. This is both a construction project and a necessity project for forestry. So the fact that we're okay with it taking a little longer to make sure the kids are involved in every phase of this is worth the extra time. It might mean that we have to look for additional options for 1 year sugaring, which we're exploring those, which either is potentially another year extending the lease or selling our sap and going somewhere else, or a variety of those things. So I'm not overly worried about that delay. And then the other update is actually the DRB meeting for Enosburg is tomorrow night. So everything's taking a little longer, and we're just going with the flow. It's from the fire permit, who Vern's been on his case for the last 3 weeks, to whatever. It's just, I think it's the new normal that things just don't always go as smoothly as possible, and we're rolling with that.
Are
So,
you in the final hearing at DRB or no? Site review?
first,
The site review.
yeah. And I believe it's 30 days after that,
You have 45 days to make a decision.
45 days after.
I mean, they can make a decision anytime between there, but they have up to 45.
Right. And like I said, we're not overly worried about it because we knew once we found out that it was in December, we figured we weren't digging a hole in January. So that's gonna have to. We're getting pushed back about a year.
Right.
We have a lot of support from local businesses that are willing to work with our students already. Letters have gone out to SDRL and Harrison, and they're willing to have our students be the laborers, which are going to severely cut costs, and we're really looking for it. Same thing with the inside. of, we wanna have every seller of maple sugar and equipment come in and speak with our students and really work with us, and I think that's gonna be pretty awesome as well. So the first ask is, as Morgan already leaned into, the $400,000 into the local budget for next year, so.
So I have a question.
Sure.
The last time you brought us the plans, we were shooting for 807,000. And so now we're thinking 6.
Well, we're very
Yeah.
very
Because of the
optimistic that
labor?
it's gonna be 6.
Okay.
I am also a realist, and there is a chance that next year at this time,
Right.
we're looking at a couple other options.
Okay.
But I'm optimistic that's not gonna happen.
Okay.
And so what those options could be would be increase the loan amount. It could be a local budget ask, or it could be putting it into a bond vote, which is another ask.
Which is it, right?
So, I'm hoping my optimism pays off here on this one.
Me too.
And I do believe, because in that number was a lot of labor, and because we are performing that labor, and labor being as expensive it is, that is where those savings are gonna come from.
And so the loan from capital reserve, remind me again, the plan to pay that back was over 10 years? What was that?
It'd probably be 20 years at $10,000 a year.
20 years?
And that is a minimum. If we have good years, and we're under promising and hoping to over deliver on that.
Okay. And the other question I had was, so just to recap what Morgan had talked about, the fact that we are no longer paying a $420,000 bond payment as of next month, that when they say, or when Nate says 400,000 in the local budget, that bond payment that we would have been paid would be more than enough to pay for that. Now, those numbers, expense numbers, is that added in it or no?
The budget that you saw has
That
400,000
in
for
it?
that.
Okay.
The other piece, which we will get into next month, is around your fund balance. So for FY '23, we had budgeted just over $30,000 of use of fund balance. And for folks who are new, when you have money left over in a year, it by default is going to go 2 years forward and reduce your taxes that year. So in FY '21, we ended the year with $30,000. That $30,000 went into buying down the tax rate of FY '23. I think the number for this year is going to be around 140,000.
Okay.
So not huge, but moving in the right direction.
Right.
I won't know that until we see a first draft of the audit, but I'm fairly confident that's where it's going to end.
Okay.
So that could be either that helps reduce the tax rate,
Right.
given that you're leaving some of these higher expenses in there. It could also be that we ask to push that to the capital reserve fund, and then that's a little more flush in future years.
Right.
Yeah, those are the two main options for that.
Okay.
So that's action item number 1, is to include the 400,000 in the local budget. So I don't know if you want to hear the other action items first, or you want to move on that one?
Well,
I don't know if we need action, but direction, because
On
they're
the-
gonna set the budget next month, and
Right.
that's gonna be the
Yeah.
action.
Okay, sought action.
Concept approval.
Concept approval of that concept.
concept approval. So is there anybody that has any, or questions or concerns or leanings around, we've already approved the $20,000 loan from the capital reserve. That is, we've already done that. Or 200,000, what did I say?
20,000.
Oh, whoops. To 100,000 from the capital reserve. So it's basically, do you have any concerns or comments or questions around putting the 400,000 in the local budget, which was already reflected in the numbers that we saw?
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
At the last meeting that we talked about this, I remember when we looked over the plans, Paula, you had brought up water allocations with the village.
Yeah.
And bid for those as well, and I did hear that, Nate, that you guys did need to get more water allocations. Is the amount that you're now gonna have to pay for those allocations included in this?
I don't know for sure on that. I know that we've been okayed on the water allocations, but we're gonna have to do a few more tests with what we're currently bringing out of our sugar house on Daigle Road. And so they wanted to see that, but I don't think they were overly concerned because of the short-term usage. So I don't know if there's a cost associated.
There is a cost
There's a
associated.
cost associated. so-
Yeah, and it's not cheap. So I think, Shayla, you're just wondering as far as like the expenses around that, if that's in consideration? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm just curious, cause I remember we had asked if there was a need for additional allocations.
Right, and there are.
And I believe Chris was the one that said no, that they had talked to the village and there was not, but I did hear that there was a need for an increase in allocations, and I know they're quite expensive. So
Yeah.
I was just curious if the number for that was included in what you're budgeting right now.
It's not, because the budget for now is
Just the construction.
just for construction, so.
And that wouldn't be until, you wouldn't have to do that until you're operational? Is that how that works?
Is that correct, Shaylee, we wouldn't be paying that until the sugar house was actually operational?
I'm not sure actually when the
I know
village
that
required payment for
I'm
that.
not sure either now that you say that. I mean, I know you have to pay for the allocations. I don't know if it's then metered or not.
I know it
Would that be something we
just
find
like
out
they
tomorrow?
pay a
You
one
would find-
time,
you'd
but
want-
I'm not sure if
yeah.
they'll require it now or if it'll be later on.
That's a good
when the
question
package is
to
up.
ask.
I don't know that.
I'm assuming I can find that out tomorrow night.
At the no, you're gonna find that out from the trustees at the village. The DRB will have nothing to do with that.
Okay.
Yeah. Gotta love two-town municipalities.
Getting an education.
Yeah.
That is the truth.
And if what you're saying you're doing those analytics around what you're actually producing would be good, because they're guesstimating and saying, we think you need this many.
Right.
It would be great if you could actually knock it down, because they are not cheap. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Okay. Akua, you have a question?
No, I was saying that.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
And then phase 3 of the project is, again, really the upgrades of the building. We've done a kind of a needs assessment with Vern and teachers around what they would need for programmatically and whatnot. And if you look at phase 3, we have a kind of a list of those needs, and we would like, and I've included some pictures of our building, so, you know, if you've been there, you know it's a little awkward, but regardless, we would like to move ahead and commit to working with Black River Design, because they're the ones that have done our studies in the past. And so they kind of have all the recent studies around all the engineering things. And so we'd like a commitment to work with Black River Design. And then as that work is happening, then bring a vote to the voters, a bond vote, to upgrade our building. So I do not have a timeline of what Black River Design would need to look at our request and kind of come in and do, make their suggestions. That's gonna be some committee work. But I would like to pursue our final phase of all these projects.
And I feel like Black River already came in, I mean, when they did all of that work before, I feel like a lot of that they could probably.
Yeah, they're not gonna have to
Yeah.
start from scratch.
No, for sure.
I just wanna clarify, I don't think you're asking the board to commit to bringing it to bond.
No.
You're asking the board to commit to,
Black
let's
River.
get Black River back engaged in this so that we can move forward with, if we are gonna go to bond, what would the recommendations be for what's included in that project?
That is what I'm saying.
And then they would look at that and decide, like, is there an option A and a B and a C?
Yep.
And then what would the board like to do?
And that said, I think it would be helpful if you go that route, if we had an idea of when a potential bond vote would be. So it clearly will not happen by March of 2023. It could happen March of 2024 without you having to warn and pay for a special
Right,
election. Could happen in November of 2024.
right.
Could happen in August of 2024 because we'll have a state primary then.
Oh.
The advantage of March, well, I don't know if it's advantage or disadvantage. March and November will have higher turnout than August
Yep,
and have much higher turnout than a special election.
right.
March is always a little worrisome because if people get mad about proposing a project and they're showing up the same time your budget vote
Budget
happens.
votes, no on both. Okay,
August is a little sketchy because you're gonna have a lot of people with kids in school who are not around.
Yeah.
And that tends to be your type of voter.
so it probably, my thought is it depends on how quickly Black River gets their ducks in a row. Right?
So if you have an ideal date, I would go to them and say, is this possible? And if they say, no, that's too soon, then you can come back and say, okay,
So you're saying,
March 24
I
is
like the November one.
so it's a year and a half? No, almost 2 years.
Say something, Sarah. What were you gonna say?
I just noticed removal of solar panels.
So if you look at that last page,
Yep.
Is that all solar panels?
those are,
So those you don't, we're gonna
They're
remove
not
those because
even
you're not using
really.
them?
They're
well,
not
they don't
solar
work.
panels,
They don't
are
work.
They
Right.
make the
They-
winter cold and the summer's hot.
Okay.
They're a passive solar system.
No. Just because they let the sun in?
They let the state, they're supposed to heat the wall behind that up.
Huh.
And then that wall's supposed to stay warm
And does it do that?
in the summer, very well.
It doesn't do that.
In the winter, if you notice all the ones on the top,
Yeah.
there is no concrete wall there. That's just fiberglass and then
Building,
no building.
I mean, just room.
Yeah.
It seems like it was a concept that they had great hopes for in the
Well, I'm
60s.
looking,
and
well,
it's-
I was looking at this, I'm like,
That's when that
this
was built.
screams.
It was
60s?
designed probably in the 70s and built early 80s.
Yeah.
Oh,
81, I think, was
What
finished.
It's called a
They-
Trombe or Trombe wall, and I think there's a reason you don't hear about it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. What are they thinking? It's
So it would be great if some of those classrooms had windows instead
Yeah.
of
yeah, it's
Or
all
all,
the warm wall.
Just warmer,
Right.
more efficient, yeah.
Well, you don't have a window, that's how you
Yeah, you
tell
might-
if the weather's doing it.
Just feel the wall.
Yeah,
It's a
exactly.
cold wall, must be a cold day.
Kind of like a cave, yeah. Okay,
So would your target be November 24?
I kind of like the November. Because for all of those reasons you just explained. Town meeting time, I don't know. And then August doesn't make sense, but November might make sense. 2024.
Yeah, there are advantages and disadvantages to each of them. And I don't know if a November 24 vote works with your timeline.
Like I said, we are very flexible. And I think it doesn't not work. We're making do with what we have now.
Yeah.
There's also, I think there's some advantages there. There's a study being done at the state level of kind of ranking schools on.
And that's the other question will there be any money between now and then?
I feel like
It's
Governor
possible.
Scott has promised us a lot of money at CT centers for a while. And so
Oh.
I think it's coming.
He's all about the CT.
I know, we know, we're all about it.
I think one of the
Well,
benefits
They're the only
too,
ones that get any money from him.
if that is something that they move
okay.
forward with, we would have an advantage if we were in the process of looking at a construction
And we had
project.
all of that.
To be able to say like, here's our
Our
project that we
plan.
could apply.
Totally.
for. I mean, the other thing I think Nate and I talked about this the other day is, thinking forward in terms of students choosing to come to Enosburg-Richford schools. This is an asset that mutually benefits both Enosburg and Richford schools, and I think that, although it feels a little scary to think about going out for a construction bond, this building is really outdated. And when we're trying to attract students to come, the CTE Center is something that a lot of kids are interested in, and there is a huge push for kids to consider options in the CTE Center to go out into the workforce or to go out into a trade school preparing for either of those paths. And I think that we have to up our game in terms of our recruitment and attracting students, because we know how much that matters in terms of those tuition students coming to us. And we are competing directly with Northwest Tech, and they have pretty beautiful facility there. So it's just something to keep in mind, even though it's challenging to think about going out to bond, it's also important, and it'll pay off in the long run if we can recruit and attract more students.
And I'm impressed on the improvement and the expansion of the programs. And like last year, we had 2 or 3 students graduate from high school with CDL. That's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, that's great.
To graduate from high school with the ability to make that much money and to be that marketable. And I'm sure Enosburg had a couple as well, right?
Yeah.
And I think that they're doing a great job.
Well, that and LNAs
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Well, I mean, I
certified to
think-
conduct state inspections in the auto shops, like
Future teachers.
future teachers.
Right, and
are
I think
really-
if you just look at our community, I mean, we've had a lot of community members go through and a lot of those kids are staying in the community, they're contributors to the community, so I think the support's there.
Yeah.
Okay, so, we're all set?
So start to work with Black River Design.
Is that what we're?
Yes.
Yes. Yep, yes. Board with SU board report. Let me read that.
Can I just clarify before we move on to board
Yeah.
report? I'm assuming you want Vern to be a part of this?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Hold on a minute. Pulling up the SU. Well, you just go here.
Can I say one more thing? I think I forgot.
No.
Next Wednesday is our annual FFA Wild Game Dinner.
Oh, right, the wild game.
Open invitation to anybody to come down around 10 o'clock, 10 to 11, 10 to 12, and hang out with the students and try.
It's very meat forward meal,
It is.
which I
Great
like,
though.
but
Yeah.
you
So,
know.
but please, if you can find the time.
I went last year because the kids have always asked me to go, so I went last year, but I didn't eat anything, but maybe I will.
It was delicious when I went a
Yeah.
few years ago, yeah.
And we're having our concert here tomorrow night, if
Oh,
anybody's
okay.
interested in attending, 6:30.
Okay, SU board report. So it started off with Michelle Irish doing a spotlight on youth and adult partnerships. And then Jody Valancourt, actually the instructional coaches were there, who did a presentation around the new teacher support system and the work they were doing. Then Morgan did his deal. And, oh, did you ever, Morgan, the financial management questionnaire, was that for Mary to fill out? You were gonna send it.
That's for the SU board to approve and Mary to sign.
Okay,
And
because
we're
we
doing
didn't
that
have
next
it, but,
month.
okay, there we go. And then Lynn,
Not able to attend that meeting.
oh, that's
Right,
right,
that's right,
that's right, okay. And then, still waiting on hearing PCB testing results.
Nothing yet.
You think we're getting closer to getting RES's results?
Okay,
I pushed Vern to push a little last week.
yeah, I mean, it's been going on
Like
a long
nothing.
time.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
End of September, we sent them
And under board business was, the SU was the recipient of an anti-racism grant. And they were thinking that the focus of that grant was around SEL
Long-term strategic plan. I think
long-term
around
strategic plan.
Portrait of a Learner. and-
Portrait of a Learner, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And then that was really about it. It was a short meeting, if I recall. 'Cause you weren't there. Yeah. Okay. And then our next meeting is January 10th, and it will be at Enosburg. Got that, Lynn?
I got that.
And then future agenda items, I can't think of any. Any hot topics, I can't think of any. And so if there's any other that anybody wants to discuss, we can. If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
Mort makes the motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. 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 Good night, everyone. Thank you.